In the gritty concrete halls of Easton Correctional Facility, nothing stayed secret for long, except the kind of secrets that could get you killed. Whispers traveled faster than light, and eyes were always watching. But in a place designed to strip men of their identity, of their humanity, sometimes connections still found a way through the cracks. Darius Monroe had been inside for nearly 8 years, serving time for armed robbery and assault. He was a towering figure with a sharp jawline and ink skin that told the story of a past soaked in violence. Yet, beneath the hardened surface was a complexity few bothered to explore. Darius didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. You either respected him or stayed the hell out of his way. Then there was Isaiah Bell, new blood, 26, slim, clean-cut, with soft hazel eyes that didn't belong in a place like Easton. Convicted for drug possession and violating parole, Isaiah was sentenced to 3 years. But everyone knew the short-timers often had it worse. Their fresh faces, their fragile confidence, it made them prey. And Isaiah knew it. From the moment he stepped into that unit, he walked like a man watching his own back. Their worlds collided in the prison library. Darius often volunteered to move books from the storage room, quiet work away from the chaos of the yard. Isaiah, assigned as a library clerk, was sorting return materials when Darius came in that afternoon. Their eyes met briefly. Then again, there was no smile, just a silent acknowledgement. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated. Darius would drop off books. Isaiah would accept them. No words exchanged. But something began to build in those silences. Curiosity, maybe. Tension, definitely. And in prison, tension could mean anything. A threat, a warning, or something much more dangerous. Isaiah didn't know why he kept stealing glances at Darius. Maybe it was the way he moved, slow, deliberate, always in control. Maybe it was the way he never joined the trash talk or tried to dominate the space. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't loud or reckless. He watched. He studied, just like Isaiah did. But desire in Easton was a double-edged sword. You didn't talk about who you looked at. You didn't show softness. Men here didn't fall in love. They fought. They survived. Yet, as the days blurred into weeks, the pull between Darius and Isaiah grew stronger. It began with a question. One afternoon, Isaiah finally spoke up while scanning books into the log. "You read this one?" he asked, holding up Native Son by Richard Wright. Darius didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "It's heavy," he said simply. Isaiah cracked a small smile. "Yeah, like everything else in here." That was all, but it was enough to open a door. After that, they started talking more. Quietly, carefully, nothing too revealing. Favorite books, the food, the guards, small, harmless things. But behind every word, there was an unspoken hunger, a need for something more than survival, something real, something human. The first time they touched was an accident, or maybe it wasn't. Isaiah handed Darius a stack of books. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away. The contact was brief, but it was electric, a spark in a place that smothered emotion. That night, Isaiah couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that moment, the way Darius looked at him, not with lust, not with threat, but with recognition, like they saw each other, truly, in a way no one else could. The danger of their growing bond didn't go unnoticed. Inmates watched everything, and while no one said anything directly, the look started, the questions, the shift in energy. Two men, always near each other, but never too close, never too obvious. It was a game of balance. If they pushed too far, too fast, it could cost them everything. So they found hidden places, empty stairwells behind storage shelves under cover of night. They exchanged whispered conversations, stolen touches, and eventually kisses, each moment more reckless than the last. For Isaiah, it felt like a lifeline, a salvation. Darius made him feel seen, protected, like he wasn't just another number in the system. For Darius, it was different. It was vulnerability, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Isaiah cracked open a part of him he thought was long dead, but love, or whatever version of it they had, was a risk inside Easton, and with risk came consequences. There was one person who watched more than the rest. A cellmate of Isaiah's named Trevor Tone Willis. He was an older inmate, deep into his third bid, and he'd taken an immediate dislike to Isaiah from the start. Maybe it was the way Isaiah carried himself. Or maybe it was jealousy. Whatever it was, Tone started watching, listening, and when he saw Darius slip into the back corridor with Isaiah one evening, he didn't say a word. Not yet. Instead, Tone waited, letting the secret rot into something poisonous. Meanwhile, Darius and Isaiah kept falling. Faster. Harder. They talked about getting out, about starting over, about not having to hide. They spoke in dreams, dangerous ones. Because no matter how deep their feelings went, reality always loomed close. Isaiah had less than 2 years left. Darius had over a decade. Time was their enemy. But it wasn't time that would destroy them. It was trust. Because while they were wrapped in each other's arms, in stolen moments and soft promises, something else was already unraveling. A silent betrayal waiting to shatter everything. Isaiah didn't know that Darius had been with other men before, long before him. And he definitely didn't know about the diagnosis Darius had kept hidden. Something he learned a year before they ever met. Something he told himself he could manage. That it wouldn't matter if he was careful. But secrets in prison never stay buried. And the moment Isaiah started feeling sick, the moment he began missing meals, sleeping too much, losing weight, Easton began to whisper again. And this time, the whisper would become a roar. Isaiah Bell didn't think much of the fatigue at first. The nights were restless, the food barely edible, and stress was constant inside Easton. Everyone walked around with heavy eyes and hollow faces. He thought he was just becoming one of them. But when the chills began, when his gums started bleeding and his skin bruised from the lightest touch, Isaiah knew something was wrong. Deeply, irreversibly wrong. It started with a fever that wouldn't break. Then came the weight loss, the sudden nausea, the night sweats that left his thin mattress soaked before sunrise. Within weeks, his once sharp frame had begun to waste away. The guards noticed. The inmates whispered. And Isaiah, he panicked. By the time the prison infirmary ran blood tests, Isaiah had already spiraled into fear. He'd never been reckless with his body. Not inside. Not even with Darius. At least, that's what he believed. The day the prison nurse called him into medical wing, her face was unreadable. Clinical. Cold. You tested positive for HIV, she said flatly, as if telling him he'd caught the flu. Isaiah couldn't speak. The walls seemed to tilt. The floor shifted beneath him. His ears rang. His mind raced, not just with fear but confusion. How? When? He hadn't been with anyone before Darius. Not inside. Not ever. He didn't cry until he was alone in his cell. And when the tears came, they came in silence, shoulders shaking, jaw clenched. He didn't want the others to hear him fall apart, but the silence made it worse. All he had were his thoughts, his memories, and one name burned through all of them, Darius. Had he known? The question gnawed at Isaiah like a disease of its own. Darius had always been guarded about his past. He never talked about what happened before Easton, never mentioned other relationships. But now, in the wake of this revelation, Isaiah began to question everything. Every word, every touch. Every time Darius looked away when he brought up the future. The next time they met in the library, Isaiah didn't speak. He couldn't. Darius noticed a shift immediately. "You good?" he asked, lowering his voice. Isaiah stared at him for a long time. He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. For 3 days, Isaiah avoided him. No library, no glances, nothing. His face grew sallow, his eyes sunken. Rumors began swirling, louder this time. Someone said he had the virus. Another said Darius had given it to him. It was poison. Prison ran on poison. And Isaiah could feel it seeping into every corner of the unit. Finally, Darius cornered him behind the kitchen during morning prep. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. Isaiah didn't hold back. "I tested positive," he hissed. "HIV. Darius's face didn't change. He didn't flinch. That alone made Isaiah's blood run cold. How long have you known? Isaiah asked. His voice cracked. Don't lie to me? There was a pause. A silence so long, Isaiah thought he might explode. Then Darius spoke, almost a whisper. A year. I found out a year ago. Isaiah's stomach dropped. You knew, he said, backing away. You knew, and you still... I didn't think it would happen. I was careful. I swear to God. You knew. Isaiah's voice rose now, trembling. And you said nothing. You let me. His voice broke completely, words unraveling into gasps. You let me fall in love with you. You let me trust you. Darius reached out, but Isaiah recoiled like he'd been burned. Don't touch me, he snapped. I didn't mean to hurt you, Darius murmured, eyes dark with guilt. I didn't want this. I didn't want you to get caught in it. Isaiah laughed bitterly. But I did. After that day, everything between them broke. Whatever intimacy once existed was reduced to stolen glances of blame and shame. Isaiah no longer cared about the rules of survival. He began speaking openly. He told Tone, his cellmate, told anyone who would listen, not in detail, not everything, but enough. The news spread like gasoline through prison. Darius had infected him. The whispers turned to accusations. The stares turned hostile. Darius wasn't feared anymore. He was despised. In the world of Easton, HIV wasn't just a sickness. It was a death sentence with shame attached. Men treated it like a curse, and those who carried it were marked. Isaiah's days became hell. His body weak, his spirit gutted, and the walls closing in around him. But beneath the pain, something dark began to bloom. A fury so raw, so personal, it drowned out everything else. Isaiah didn't know if Darius had truly meant to hurt him, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he did. The betrayal lived under Isaiah's skin now, just like the virus. The worst part? He still loved him, even in his rage, even in his sickness. He missed the comfort, the warmth, the illusion of being safe in someone's arms. And that was the most unforgivable sin of all, because now, every good memory twisted into a lie. Every kiss now felt like a weapon. Every promise, a setup. At night, he lay awake in his bunk, fists clenched, staring into the dark. He wanted justice. But in Easton there was no court, no apology, no redemption. There was only vengeance. And Isaiah was no longer afraid of what it might cost, because everything that could be taken from him already had been. Easton Correctional was never silent. Even in the dead of night, something always stirred. The rustle of bunk sheets, the clank of steel-toed boots, the distant, haunting echo of someone crying in the dark. But what cut through more sharply than any sound was attention. It hung heavy in the air, thick as smoke, especially between Isaiah and Darius. After the truth surfaced that Darius had knowingly infected Isaiah with HIV, prison politics took over. The inmates turned cold. Darius, once respected and quietly feared, became a pariah. They stopped nodding to him in the yard, stopped sitting near him during meals. Eyes followed him everywhere, not because he was powerful anymore, but because he was dangerous in a different way. Contagious, a walking curse. But worse than the silence was the whispering. Tone, Isaiah's cellmate, had made sure of that. Tone had always hated Darius. The way he carried himself like he was untouchable. The way younger inmates like Isaiah gravitated toward him. When Tone found out what had happened, he didn't just let the rumors spread. He fed it. He told others Isaiah was just the first. That Darius had been with others too. That he knew what he was doing. He painted Darius as a predator, a man who used sex as a weapon. Truth didn't matter. Perception did. And Isaiah, he didn't stop it. At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. He needed protection now more than ever. And siding with the rest of the prison against Darius gave him safety, a shield. But underneath, something darker was growing inside him. Rage had rooted itself deep in his chest. Not just for what Darius had done, but for how weak Isaiah still felt when he saw him. The twisted pull hadn't disappeared. It just curdled into hate. Darius, meanwhile, changed too. He stopped speaking, stopped going to the library. He ate alone. He walked with his head down, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying invisible weight. But behind that silence was something dangerous. Darius had always controlled his emotions, always kept them locked behind a mask. But now, cracks were starting to show. One morning in the yard, Darius passed Isaiah without a word. Their shoulders brushed. Not by accident. Isaiah turned sharply. "You got something to say?" he growled. Darius didn't look at him. He just muttered, "I told you I didn't mean to hurt you." Isaiah laughed bitterly. "You ruined my life. And you still think this is about meaning?" That was the last time they spoke. But it wasn't the last time they saw each other. Because from that moment on, Darius began watching Isaiah, not with softness, not with regret, but with something colder, darker, like Isaiah had taken something from him. Too, like the betrayal went both ways. That week, a scuffle broke out in the dining hall. Two men shoved each other over a tray, and a third got involved. In the chaos, Darius stepped toward Isaiah's table, just a few feet away. Their eyes met. Isaiah felt his stomach twist. Darius didn't blink. He looked at him like prey. Later that night, Tone warned Isaiah. "He ain't just going to take this lying down," he said. "You think you expose him and that's it? Nah, dudes like him don't let things go. He's planning something." Isaiah didn't sleep that night. By the next day, he started carrying a sharpened toothbrush in his waistband, a makeshift shank. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He didn't trust the guards to protect him. Hell, some of them were already treating him differently since the rumors started, like he was a disease himself. Isaiah was alone, except for Tone, and Tone had his own demons. The breaking point came during a Saturday morning yard break. It was humid, the sky was gray, and the yard buzzed with nervous energy. The guards were distracted. An inspection in one of the wings had pulled their attention. Fewer eyes, fewer barriers. Darius was sitting alone on one of the concrete benches. Isaiah felt the moment before he saw it, like gravity pulling him towards something inevitable. He hadn't planned anything, but as he saw Darius stand and move toward the corner of the yard, something inside him snapped. He followed. Darius must have heard his footsteps, because he didn't turn around. He just kept walking, slow and deliberate, toward the far side where the cameras didn't always catch everything. Isaiah caught up behind him and grabbed his arm. Darius whirled around fast. They were face to face now, inches apart, both breathing hard. "You got something to say now?" Darius snarled. Isaiah pulled the toothbrush blade from his waistband. "You took everything from me," he said. Darius didn't flinch. "You think you're the only one hurt? You think you didn't destroy me, too? You destroyed yourself," Isaiah spat, "and you dragged me down with you." Then, for one surreal moment, the two just stood there, years of pain, guilt, love, and hatred colliding between them in silence. And then it happened, not from Isaiah, from Darius. He lunged first. A fist connected with Isaiah's jaw, hard enough to send him stumbling back. The blade clattered to the ground. Darius was on him in seconds, fists flying. It wasn't like a normal prison fight. There was no posturing, no crowd, no theatrics. This was personal, brutal, a silent explosion of everything they'd both been holding in. Isaiah fought back, bloodying Darius's nose, scratching, kicking, screaming. But Darius had rage on his side. He got Isaiah pinned and slammed his head once, twice, into the dirt. By the time the guards broke it up, Isaiah's face was swollen beyond recognition. Blood soaked the dirt. Darius's knuckles were torn open, his chest heaving with rage. Both men were dragged away. Both were thrown into segregation. But only one of them would leave with a beating. The other would soon leave with something far worse. Solitary confinement didn't fix anything. If anything, it made everything worse. The isolation, the silence, the cold meals, the endless hours with nothing but a steel bed and your own thoughts. It twisted the mind like a screw in soft wood. For Isaiah Bell, locked in a 6x9-foot cell for 23 hours a day, the rage began to ferment. Every hour he sat in that room replayed the betrayal, the beating, the blood and the dirt. He stared at the cracks in the wall and imagined Darius's face. He replayed how it all started, How it felt like love had turned into a trap. He remembered Darius's mouth on his skin, the lies whispered like gospel, the warmth that once felt safe and real. All of it had become poison. He had tried to walk away. He had tried to expose him. And still, he was the one left with a virus in his veins, a broken face, and no one to protect him, not even the guards, especially not the guards. By the time Isaiah was released from solitary after 2 weeks, something in him had snapped completely. He was no longer interested in justice, or healing, or forgiveness. He wanted blood, and he was no longer afraid of the consequences. When he walked back into general population, the yard went quiet. He was skinnier, face hollowed out, eyes colder. Even Tone noticed a change. "You good?" he asked. Isaiah nodded once. "Yeah, I'm good." But the truth was, he was past good, past human. Word traveled fast. Darius was still in seg, but he was coming out soon. Inmates whispered that he'd been put on watch after the fight. They said he'd asked to be transferred. Some said he was scared. Others said he was planning something. But one thing was certain. The war between the two men wasn't over. It was just beginning. When Darius finally reappeared in the yard 5 days later, the air thickened. He looked leaner, meaner. His face had healed, but his eyes were unreadable. He walked alone. No one dared approach him. Not out of respect, but out of fear what followed him like a shadow. Isaiah didn't speak to him. He didn't need to. Instead, he started watching, studying his every move. Darius always walked the same loop around the yard, always paused by the fence for a few minutes, always sat on the far bench for his afternoon reading. It didn't take long to figure out his pattern. Every soldier watches before he strikes. Isaiah knew he couldn't get to Darius in broad daylight, not with eyes on every tower. But Easton had blind spots, places the cameras didn't reach, places the guards didn't patrol as often. One of those was a laundry corridor behind Cell Block C, a narrow, dimly lit hallway that led from the industrial washers to the loading dock. It was rarely used, except during linen drop-offs. And Isaiah knew the schedule. He waited. For days he waited, storing his anger like fuel. And then, on a Friday afternoon, he made his move. He got a message to a kitchen worker who owed him a favor. Asked him to tell Darius that Tone wanted to squash the beef, that he wanted to talk, that he'd be waiting in the laundry corridor during linen hour. It was the kind of message Darius wouldn't ignore. Not because he cared about Tone, but because it smelled too much like a trap not a check. And Isaiah knew Darius. He wouldn't send someone else. He'd come himself. Isaiah arrived early, hiding in the shadowed corner near the supply crates. He gripped a sharpened metal rod he had fashioned from a bed frame, thin, jagged, and long enough to puncture. He had hidden it for weeks, waiting for this exact moment. No second thoughts, no hesitation, just one chance. When Darius stepped into the corridor, the door closed behind him with a soft click. He paused. He saw no one. "Tone!" he called out. Silence. Then footsteps. And from the darkness, Isaiah emerged. Darius didn't flinch, didn't step back. He just stared, expressionless. "I knew it'd be you," he said flatly. Isaiah didn't speak. "You really gonna do this?" Isaiah's voice was hollow. "You already killed me. I'm just finishing the job." Darius stepped forward slowly, almost daring him. "You still love me, don't you?" That was the last thing he said. The first stab landed just below the ribs. Darius gasped, staggered back, but Isaiah was already on him. 1, 2, 3, 4. The blade tore through flesh with savage precision. Isaiah had no grace, no rhythm, just pure, blinding rage. He stabbed Darius in the chest, the stomach, the neck, over and over, until the body collapsed in a twitching, gurgling heap on the cold concrete floor. Even then, Isaiah didn't stop. He knelt beside the body and kept driving the blade into it, long after Darius had gone still. The blood pooled around him, soaking his pants, his hands, his shoes. It didn't matter. He couldn't feel anything anymore. When the guards found him, he was sitting against the wall, covered in blood, staring blankly at Darius's lifeless body. The weapon still rested beside him, slick and crimson. He didn't resist, didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared. Later, during interrogation, he gave only one statement. He knew what he gave me. I gave it back. The murder rocked Easton Correctional. Inmates were locked down for a full week. The corridor was scrubbed, but the stain never fully came out. No one spoke of it openly, but everyone knew. Everyone remembered. It wasn't just a killing. It was an execution born from betrayal, sickness, and the twisted remains of love. Isaiah was tried, found guilty of second-degree murder, and transferred to a high-security facility. He was placed in permanent administrative segregation. He spends 23 hours a day in a cell, staring at gray walls. He never denied it, never apologized. Some say he's still haunted by Darius's face. Others say he sees him in dreams, sometimes smiling, sometimes bleeding. But Isaiah never talks about Darius anymore, because some names, when spoken aloud, still taste like blood. The murder of Darius Monroe didn't just end a life. It ruptured the uneasy balance within Easton Correctional. For weeks after his death, the prison sat in a tense hush, like a building waiting for an aftershock. Inmates moved differently. Conversations fell flat, and even the most hardened guards stepped lighter around the tiers. No one was surprised Darius had been killed. What stunned them all was how. The brutality, the rage, the cold, methodical way Isaiah Bell had carried it out, then sat beside the body as if he were simply done with a chore. It wasn't a crime of impulse. It was a reckoning. The official report sanitized the story. It described the event as an altercation in the laundry corridor resulting in fatal injuries to one inmate. But inside those walls, the truth had already been branded into prison folklore. Everyone knew it was more than a fight. It was vengeance. It was love turned to hatred. Sickness turned to justice, and heartbreak turned into murder. The guards found Isaiah smeared with blood, unbothered, quiet. When they cuffed him, he didn't speak, didn't fight. When they dragged him to solitary, he didn't ask for a lawyer. For days, he didn't eat, barely blinked. He just sat in the dark, haunted by silence, as if Darius's blood still clung to his skin. When they finally brought him out to stand trial for second-degree murder, Isaiah's face was hollow. He looked older, sickly, more ghost than man. The courtroom lights were too bright for someone who had spent so much time in shadow. The world outside had moved on while Isaiah had been crumbling behind concrete walls. The prosecution laid out the facts cold and clinical. Isaiah had lured Darius to a remote part of the prison. He had armed himself with a weapon. He had struck without warning. No attempt to de-escalate. No cry for help. Just steel and blood and silence. But Isaiah's lawyer leaned into the pain. She told the jury about betrayal, about trust, about love in places where love wasn't supposed to exist. She spoke softly of the virus, of the horror Isaiah felt when he learned he had been infected. She called it a murder in slow motion, a wound Isaiah would carry for the rest of his life. Still, it wasn't enough to excuse what he had done. Isaiah was found guilty. The judge delivered the sentence with a heavy voice. 25 years to life in a maximum security facility. With time already served, it didn't matter. He'd die behind bars. But Isaiah didn't flinch when they read the verdict. Didn't cry. He only asked one thing before they took him away. I want to be kept alone. The state granted his request. For the safety of others, and perhaps for his own, Isaiah was transferred to an isolated housing unit at Belmont Supermax, an institution built for inmates the system no longer knew what to do with. There, in the belly of a prison even colder than Easton, Isaiah disappeared from view. No more visitors. No more letters. No appeals. Just silence. The story, however, didn't fade. Within Easton, Darius's name became something no one dared speak. Not out of respect, but fear of what love could become when left to rot. Younger inmates heard the story in whispers. 2 men, secret lovers. One infected the other. One murdered the other. They called it the blood pact. Others simply referred to it as the Isaiah thing, as if naming it too clearly would invite the same kind of doom. Some inmates called Isaiah a monster, others a martyr, but nobody really knew the truth. Not the guards, not the lawyers. Only Isaiah and Darius had ever truly understood the weight of what passed between them. The love, the betrayal, the slow spiral into obsession and death. And now, only one of them remained to remember it. Outside the prison walls, there was no headline, no media frenzy. A brief article ran in the back of a local newspaper. Inmate killed during altercation at Easton Facility. No names, no story. Just another number added to a growing list of violence behind bars. Society barely blinked, but for the families, what little remained of them, the consequences lingered. Darius's mother received a call from the warden. No ceremony, no condolences, just a few clipped sentences. Her son had been killed. There would be an autopsy. She could claim the body or let the state cremate him. She didn't claim it. She said Darius had died the moment he was convicted. Isaiah's family had long since stopped answering his letters. His diagnosis had driven a wedge between him and the few people who still acknowledged his existence. His mother cried when she heard the news, not just because he had taken a life, but because, in her words, he lost himself before the knife ever touched the skin. Now, in Belmont, Isaiah spends his days in a concrete tomb. He doesn't talk to guards. He doesn't attend group therapy or religious services. He eats in silence, showers under surveillance. When asked about Darius, he gives no answer. But once, during a mental health evaluation, a prison psychologist asked him a simple question. Do you regret it? Isaiah didn't speak for several minutes. Then he said, I regret trusting him. And the murder? She asked. He looked up, eyes calm, and whispered, that was the only part that made sense. He never spoke again. Years passed. Inmates came and went. New fights broke out. New names filled the walls. But in the darkest corners of Easton, older prisoners still told the story of Isaiah Bell and Darius Monroe, of two men who dared to love each other in a place built to kill emotion, a betrayal sewn into the skin like disease, of blood spilled as a final answer to a question no one was allowed to ask. And in that silence, the kind that only lives in the aftermath of truth too ugly to speak, Isaiah Bell sits, alone, alive, and forgotten. If you think this story was chilling, trust me, there's more where that came from. Subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed, where we uncover the darkest truths buried in bloodlines, betrayal, and broken trust. Every week, we dig deeper into real stories that are more twisted than fiction. Don't just watch from the surface. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and join the community that isn't afraid to face the truth. Because in this world, family secrets don't stay buried forever. They kill,